over the weekend on Fanatics Collects, there was I don't know, but the one of one tops now, Caleb Williams from this past year's draft. It was a Caleb Williams one of one autograph sold for $37,000. And it is a tops now, like I said, from the draft. It has his autograph and then also says first card as a pro. And I think that there was some feedback, or there was maybe a controversy, maybe you could call it a controversy, that Caleb Williams hadn't had any Panini instant autos. And I think people were wondering what's going on here, but I don't necessarily think that is an issue. He probably signed these cards. I don't think these players should be and I think if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me talk about the exclusive autographs that I don't think should exist. I don't think these exclusive contracts, I think if any player wants to get paid by any company, he should be allowed to. And I think it goes to not really the NIL deals, but the sponsorship deals. In sponsorships, I do understand the exclusives between different industries, but within sports cards, it feels like for the industry, there just shouldn't be exclusive autograph deals or exclusive licensing deals with specific players. I understand the specific leagues. I understand the business side of it, but at the same time, I also think that I think maybe even those shouldn't exist, to be honest, either. But I think with this card specifically, too, you have to look at a couple different things. I think there is an inscription, on the card, he signed it, and then he said it's first card as a pro. So, I think the inscription, is important. And I think it also goes to, selling the card at the right time. Because as of right now, you're probably not seeing any other one-of-one autographs for Caleb Williams out of any Panini products. And there's still big products to come out this year, but we're 6 or 7 weeks in, and I actually don't even really want. I know, unfortunately, if you're a Bears fan, you're probably listening to this podcast just cringing at what happened over this past weekend, unfortunately, with Jaden Daniels coming out and throwing a Hail Mary. And then there was the video of one of the defensive backs yelling at the fans or something, which I think that's a little bit overblown, if I'm going to be completely honest. The play had tons of time to develop, and there was a good 10 seconds-ish between them when the player was yelling and then when the play actually unfolded. So I don't know. It's a lucky play. So I don't think it's necessarily that player shouldn't be chastised, I think, from doing something like that. Obviously, it's not, I wouldn't suggest doing it. If you're going to be in position, be in position. It's very similar to a couple years ago when there was that crazy Miami versus New England Hail Mary, or not. Actually, it wasn't even a Hail Mary. It was a lateral where they put Gronk out there on the field to play defense, and he ended up being the last player that was beat to the player past Gronk, and then he ends up scoring the touchdown. So the Caleb Williams cards, like I said, I think it goes to a couple different things. I think the inscription's important, and then timing really here. Like I said, I think you're not seeing any of these big cards sell that are Panini cards, because obviously it's Topps. It's also not licensed because it is a draft card, so he is wearing a suit. And I don't know, if I'm Topps, I think if I'm Topps, this is a smart decision to come out with these cards. The draft cards. I don't know if the licensed card or the unlicensed cards are necessarily that great of an idea. I've talked about wanting them to have waited on coming out with the unlicensed, the composite football or the Topps Chrome basketball or the Topps Mercury basketball with the Victor Wembanyama autographs. And I look at the unlicensed non-on-field cards, and I think that they are going to be important in the future also. That's kind of the maybe the other thing. And the sort of the last thought that I have on this card specifically is I wonder if this is going to be a trend for whatever the first card is. And Topps now really has that opportunity to come out with whatever the first card is. And that's why I've sort of been an advocate for Topps Now. This is obviously a one-of-one autograph, so like the non-autograph cards, I'm not as I'm not as high on. I still do really like them, and I still think that they are important when it comes to the landscape of rookie cards. I think it's probably harder to explain what a print on demand card is to somebody who is new to the industry. But I also think it's hard to explain what the rookie card that you should be getting, like if it's for football, like, if someone's coming in and they're new, why would you just be like, yeah, it's Prism? But that's just because it's an industry standard. But it's an industry standard that's been determined by the industry, not by Panini. Like if you look at the other Topps flagship products for baseball, that would be a card that you could tell someone to go buy, and it makes sense why you would buy that card. Like it makes sense that like the Topps, like there's no name like if you look at a slab, like a graded card of any of those Topps flagship cards, it just says 2024 Topps. I think some of them do say Topps Update, but either way, it's not like it's Panini Prism, or it's not like Panini Donruss or Panini Optic or Panini Select. Topps Update is obviously different than those. It's going to be the flagship. But the Topps Now card, I guess in theory, it is a little bit harder to explain, maybe potentially, like, because to find the information about that card, I think is fairly hard to find. I think you could go to a place like Check Out My Cards or a trading card database, and you could sort by like oldest to maybe potentially find what the oldest one is. But even then, if you are a baseball player, you're probably going to have like Bowman, which is another one that is, I guess, a little bit hard to explain. But I think Bowman is maybe similar to Prism, where it is a industry standard. I think with Bowman, Bowman ends up being the first card of a player in their pro uniform. So that is, I guess, a little bit easier to explain of the difference between that or the Topps flagship. Because, if it's Topps debut, for example, that one they're in like their minor league uniforms. So like the Bowman, they're going to be in a pro uniform, even though it's before they end up playing in the pros. And that's, I guess, one of the other pieces of the biggest difference maybe between baseball and any of the other sports is that baseball, you have pre-rookie cards that are considered the rookie card you want to get, which I guess, Bowman, for example, is like, if you look at like, for example, Caleb Williams, like Bowman card, like that's why I just see those college cards being so much more valuable than maybe people are projecting them to be, in my opinion. Because if you look at Bowman, like, sure, they're in their pro uniforms. Hopefully they're going to play for that team eventually. But like, the pre-rookie card is, for baseball, what is the most important card. So I just don't understand how it doesn't translate over to Bowman for football and Bowman for basketball. But I guess I understand why the Topps Now has not exactly translated into like being one of those top cards that people want to get of a player, other than, if it's a one-of-one auto. And I think that kind of goes to like what I was saying at the beginning of the episode. If it's a one-of-one auto, that one makes a little bit more sense. But like a Topps Now, there's just so many Topps Now cards for those players most of the times. I can see why it might be a little bit more complicated. And I think this year too, with Topps Now, they've actually been using a lot of like college images and photoshopping the pro uniforms onto the college images for the Topps Now, which on one hand, I guess I understand, but like the whole point of Topps Now is that it's supposed to be an image from the game that they played in. So it's like, if you are photoshopping Caleb Williams or you're photoshopping Jalen Daniels, you are using an image that is not the one from the actual game that they played in. That one I definitely have a little bit more of a hard time justifying, being like, this is the one you should get. Now, when they get the licenses, that's when I think that for football and for basketball, I don't know, I just see the Topps Now being such a important card in the grand scheme of things that I can see why this card would sell for 30 grand, because it's one of the it's one of it maybe is his first card. Now, granted, it's not a card of a player in their uniform. And I think that then goes to maybe the importance of the autograph on the card, because that's really what has made this card. That's maybe the reason why it sold for 30,000, because the auto is really like, it's one of his first autos on a card. So there are a bunch of different aspects here to why I understand why this card sold for 30,000. And in the future, I hope that Topps I hope that they do a better job with Topps now with these new sports that they're getting, because this will be, Panini does Panini Instant, and Topps should be probably using some of what Panini has done with Panini Instant. But at the same time, I think Topps now has just been such a more dominant print on demand product that I don't know, maybe what they are doing is the correct strategy. So there's kind of there's two pieces to this episode that I want to talk about. So it kind of started with, over the weekend on Fanatics Collects, one of one auto, the RPAs, or because I don't know, I'm a little bit confused about how many one of one RPAs there are in Topps Mercury. Like, I don't know if this is the only one, but this one has the Jordan logo as the patch, which is pretty wild, and it's on card. I mean, it's a beautiful card. I mean, again, if you were to look at this card and you were not to know that it was unlicensed, I don't know if you'd be able to tell, really, because the way that Wembanyama is standing, he's standing there with the ball in front of his chest, so all of the logos technically are covered. I think there usually is an NBA logo in like the near the neckline of the jersey, so maybe that's the only one that's like not there that you can kind of tell that's not there. But so that one of one patch sold for the rookie patch auto sold for $108,000, making that the fourth most expensive Wembanyama card to sell. Number one, which I pulled some of this data from Card Ladder because I saw that it sold and I was like, oh, what are some of the other, I saw a Wembanyama card sold for $100,000. What were some of the other ones? And I completely forgot that the Black Shimmer first off the line one of one from Prism, which I believe was a PSA 9, that sold for $516,000, which is, pretty crazy for a rookie. I guess in this era, I think it's more crazy. In the past, we definitely have seen cards. We've definitely seen rookie cards in their rookie years sell for $1 million. And technically, this isn't during Wembanyama's rookie year, I guess. He's had that rookie year under his belt, one rookie of the year, and he's in his second year. But the product obviously came out, and it's considered a rookie product. So then number 2 was a Prism Gold, number to 10, BGS 9, sold for $150,000. And then a Green Shimmer Prism first off the line, number to 5, PSA 10, sold for $113,000. So those are the top 4. And then number 5 was a Black Gold, number to 5, Prism, PSA 9, that sold for $68,000. A lot of money being spent on one player, which, I guess it's not super surprising. I think Wembanyama, because that amount of money was spent, I think, on Zion as well, and Ja for the most part. I think both of them had a lot of hype behind them. And granted, they also had a pandemic year that really kind of, I think, inflated a lot of their cards pretty significantly, which on one hand, and I know this is not really part of the point of the episode, but on one hand, with those cards, people were saying that the COVID checks, they helped with the prices of sports cards, which I'm beginning to think that they maybe did a little bit more than I thought they did back in the day, because back in the day I was fully on board of no, these were going to be the prices. This was going to be sort of the trajectory we saw for a lot of these cards. It doesn't matter that people were getting money that they maybe necessarily didn't need. I think I was probably in that boat. I mean, I had a job, and then I also, there was a time where unfortunately, I was on unemployment, but the unemployment was enough where it was similar to what I was making at my job. So I didn't feel like I necessarily needed, it definitely was nice, but either way, So I think with Zion and Ja, that affected their prices. So we have seen players in early on in their career sell for this price. Now, Wembanyama is probably the most hyped prospect since, I mean, I would say LaMelo Ball probably, but then LaMelo Ball, Zion are probably 1 and 2 there in terms of like where we saw how excited people were. But the other piece of this episode that I want to talk about that I thought was very interesting was when I went to Fanatics Collect, because I was looking for the price of this card, and I wanted to see. I was like, oh, interesting. Like, let me see what some of the other cards that sold this weekend were. Because I talked about on the podcast yesterday the 1-of-1 Topps Now card, which, sorry, just to interject on that point, actually, I do want to make a correction. The Topps Now football cards are very bad, and I don't know. I don't want to sit here and tell you not to buy those cards, but like, there was a Jaden Daniels one that it was a photoshopped card of his where the image was literally just a background image from the game. Like, you can find it on Getty Images. I forget who. I think it might have been the Blowout Forum put this like on Twitter. It was just you could see the background image of just, he's not in it, and they just photoshopped him in there. So I don't know. I'm not saying boycott Topps Now football, but like, again, it's another example of Topps, I think, unfortunately, that they should have just waited, because if you're not in on everything, you wouldn't know that's because also there's Bears fans in the background, and it is a picture from the game. So it's like, I don't know. It's I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the way that they're doing this, to be honest. But so Fanatics Collects, I went to the website, and the first thing I saw in their sold section was the 1-of-1 Luka National Treasures RPA. And I was like, in my head, I was like, wait. Fanatics Collect sold the 1-of-1 Luka RPA. And then I was looking through the dates, and I was like, wait, 2022. And then I was looking, they had all these Tom Brady's. I saw, I'm like, wait, how have I not known that Fanatics Collects sold all of these cards? But then I remember that, this is just PWCC, which I think Fanatics Collects needs to, I know that they retired the PWCC branding, I think for obvious reasons, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I like that they are able to associate. I don't know if I'm a fan of that Fanatics is allowed to associate their brand with some of these massive card sales, because anybody who doesn't, like, if you were getting into sports cards now, there's a very significant chance you don't even know what PWCC is, and you'll never see it again. And the only reason that people know about PWCC are the people that were in sports cards before Fanatics bought the brand, which, that feels pretty obvious, but it feels like also somewhere on the site there, I don't know, it just feels like they should put like a date being like, we didn't sell these cards. Like, I don't know, it just seems disingenuous maybe to a point, like from just a consumer trust perspective, like, because Fanatics Collects didn't sell the cards. They just rebranded the PWCC marketplace platform to Fanatics Collects. So I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I was looking through Fanatics Collects, and it just, all of the like $2 million Brady cards are on here. There's a bunch of like Mahomes RPAs. It is just the PWCC platform that they rebranded to Fanatics Collects. Now, actually, now I'm thinking about it, let me click on this Luka and see if it mentions it anywhere. I mean, because it doesn't. It says all it says is Premier Auctions. It has the price, which I actually kind of like how basic and simple the design of this is. Really, like if you click on any of the sold auctions, it pretty much, because like it's good for content. And I think not an issue, but one thing that I think is interesting, if you go to other auction websites, after the card is sold, there's so much extra detail that you don't need. And it's like, and again, maybe it's Fanatics doing their type of analytics and research to say like, hey, if we want people to make content about these things, then we have to make it as simple as possible for them to make the content, right? Like if we put all these extra details, it's going to take away probably from the piece of content, and they're not going to use, like, the Fanatics, I think, wants you to use what they're giving you if you're making content about certain cards or certain sales, which totally, I mean, that totally makes sense. And I can see why they would want to do that, in my opinion. I mean, like I said, I clicked on it immediately. I was like, I like this layout. But it doesn't say anywhere that this was a card that was sold through PWCC. And I guess I'm okay with them wanting to rebrand to Fanatics Collects. But I also think the rebrand also, like I said, in 10, 15 years, anybody who is getting into sports cards from now to 10 years from now, they're going to go to Fanatics Collects. If, hypothetically, if Fanatics, I would imagine based on their business, what they're doing now, they probably will still be around. But they're basically just associating themselves with sales that aren't theirs. Like, and I don't know. I'm not a massive fan of that. But like I said, from a business perspective, I can see how they look at it and say, well, if we can get people to associate those sales with us, even though we didn't do them, I guess that's fine. I guess that's what they're looking to do. Maybe that was part of the buying of the PWCC brand, to associate the Fanatics branding with $1 million sports card sales. On one sense, obviously, I can see how that would be beneficial for them. But on the other hand, somebody who is in the know, like myself, in my opinion, I'm looking at this and saying, I don't really know if I'm a big fan of them just essentially poaching these sports card sales and saying that they were the ones that sold these items. This probably won't come as much of a shock to anybody, but I think that Panini may have dropped the ball when it comes to their college card just program in general, like all the college cards that they have, because they had basically 100% of the market share when it came to anybody buying college cards before the NIL contracts came into play, which I think the NIL contracts is sort of what has sparked this kind of conversation. But Panini was the only company coming out with college cards, really. Like, maybe Leaf had a couple different ones, but Topps, before they were coming out with Bowman, which they didn't, when NIL came into play, that's when we started seeing Topps come back with more college cards. And so Panini put out a tweet that they are, I guess, including players that are in college in this year's, the rated prospects are going to be in this year's National Treasures collegiate football. There was a Quinn Ewers along with like a Michael Penix and a JJ McCarthy. And then they also had like the Mahomes in there. But to my knowledge, I looked up last year's collegiate football and there were no rookies that were still in college that were rookies this year in that product. So if this may be one of the first times that Panini has included current college players in a collegiate product, which is a big change from what they had been doing before, which this is the thing. They hadn't made any changes at all. When NIL came around, all the only differences that they did were they came out with like Panini Instant college cards, licensed college cards. But their college lineup of products didn't change at all. And I think the thing that is annoying to me, and the thing that I say when I say that they dropped the ball, here's why I think that they dropped the ball, is because they had 100% of the college card market share before Topps started coming out with their Bowman products. And for a year before there were licensed college products, Topps was coming out with their Bowman football and Bowman basketball. And this goes for basketball also. This is not just football, but it's just football is on the mind because collegiate football, first off the line, is they put out a tweet about that it's coming out in the next like week or so. But so Panini was the only company coming out with college cards. Now I've talked at length about why I didn't like the strategy, but also the strategy was based on the parameters of the licenses that they had. Sure. But once NIL came around, they haven't this this is really the first change to an actual product that they've made that I've seen, at least, to a college product. And they let they just let Topps walk through the front door. Like, Panini had all of the market share if they were to just come out with these college products sooner. Like, even if it's like a Prism product, like, they had the ability really to come out with like college product, because Topps was doing it with Bowman. And this is why I get annoyed and frustrated with Panini, is because Topps was doing it. So it's like, Panini, you could be doing this. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me that now, and I think that both companies, I think, have the college licenses, which now they're coming out with, like, I think Panini owns the licenses for, I believe it's Ohio State, Nebraska, and Texas. So, unfortunately, now we're going to start to see the splintering off of colleges within college products, because, again, Panini was not quick enough to somehow gain the exclusive college license just overall, which I'm sure NIL makes things a little bit complicated. And with the amount of colleges there are, that's probably another reason why they had trouble here. But, like, I think it is also a tightrope walk. Maybe that's it. Either way, it's a very thin line that they have to walk down here, because on one hand, you want the players that are known to be the ones that are the important players within any of these college products. But also at the same time, I think it should be important for these companies to be the first company to make a card of a player. Cam Ward, for example, he was in 2022 Bowman football, and he wasn't on Miami, so he was on Washington State at the time. So it's like, at that time, Cam Ward was not what he is now. Like, he was not a Heisman candidate at Washington State. Then he transfers to Miami, and now he's been playing phenomenally, and he's really kind of brought Miami back into the spotlight here. But, like, Topps owns his first card, really. Like, one of his first cards is a Topps Bowman card. So it's like, the line that you have to walk between getting marketable players within your product, but also being able to get the first of some player's card, is like such a thin, again, I'm using this analogy, there's such a thin microscopic line here, because you want to be able to market the product with important players, but it's also, I think, important to get the players their first card, which I think it's hard to do both of those things, because once a player, Cam Ward, for example, gets to a point where he is transferred to Miami and he is a Heisman candidate, like, there's probably a decent shot that he was in one of these Bowman products. But if Panini had, I don't know, looked at it, and I granted also, I think I look at it and say, well, Panini can't make a college card of every quarterback in college football, because ultimately, I think quarterback cards are going to be the ones that people want to collect. Maybe Ashton Gentry, the running back from Boise State, potentially people might want his cards. But, like, Panini had the opportunity, they had the market share, and they just let Topps walk in the front door when they knew that they were going to be losing all of these pro licenses. They just said, you know what, we're going to try and make as much money off of the pro cards as we can, and not really care as much about college, because if they cared more, they could have had people doing scouting. They could have had people actually determining who should be getting these cards, and then coming out with products and having those first cards. Like, if they came out with a Prism product, for example, like, even if you were to just say, of the top 25 teams or top 100 teams, maybe. Take the best quarterbacks from all of those teams, and there's a pretty take the top 50 quarterbacks and put them into, or maybe not even 50. I don't know, maybe 30. It's like, again, I don't know what the exact formula or strategy here would be for Panini, but to just sit back and let Topps walk all over a market that you basically had in your grasp for years is it's like, I don't know, I don't want to call it irresponsible, but it's like, it's such bad business by Panini really here, especially when you know you're losing all of the basketball and football licenses. And you, now granted, the NIL licenses make it so I don't think that there's the as much of an exclusivity as there are with the other sports. And granted, also, there's only 16 or there's 32 teams in the NFL. There's 30 teams in the NBA. If you want to come out with a college product and you want to come out with a card that is going to be the first card of a player, there's probably a decent likelihood that you have to consider 60 to 100 teams and pick players from those. And by the time that they get to the point where it's like people want to collect those cards, they probably already have a card, So it's very, I don't know. It's disappointing that Panini did that. Is it surprising? No, because I don't know. Panini seems like they're just kind of mailing it in here. Seems like they are just saying, we're going to do what we can for the next few years. And then we're just going to, we're going to come back together after we lose all these licenses and figure out what the strategy after the fact is, when in reality, I wish that they could look at it and say, if they have an opportunity to be the top company of any of the specific sports, like college sports in this example, like they could have said, we're going to go out and get all the NIL licenses, or we're going to go out and make these college products the way that Topps is doing with Bowman, like, because they have the rated prospects, and they do that with baseball. Like, they have rated prospects for baseball also. So it's like, to come out with this rated prospect concept for college football or college basketball, I think would have been a much better strategy than to, just basically wave the white flag and increase the print runs and increase the amount of cards you have for your other sports, when in a few years, you're not going to have those sports. And you had all the market share of one sport, and you essentially let it go for almost nothing, honestly. I am a big fan of data, I mean, especially within the sports card industry. And I think the website. So, and if you type in alt, you got to do alt sports cards, because it doesn't pop up right away when I was looking for it, which I don't know if there's a way they can fix that. I don't think there necessarily is, because it is only, 3 letters. So I think that they have potentially one of the better sports card buying and selling platforms online right now. Because they have so much data and integrated information on their platform that I do see them as one of the companies that could sustain themselves long term here. And I think, eBay, obviously, I think ComC is probably one that's always going to stand the test of time. But like I said, Alt is one of the newer platforms that I see as kind of a long-term, partner, a long-term player. Sorry, excuse me. No pun intended here, because we're talking about sports cards, but a long-term player within the industry. Because if you go to their platform, they give you a lot of the data that I think is very important for customers to make to make smart sports card buying decisions. Because that's another thing within the industry. I think for so many years, all we really had was eBay for like comps on cards. And even before that, all we really had was like Beckett Magazine. There wasn't really many options when it came to trying to figure out anything within the sports card industry. And that's like one thing, like when I got back into cards and I was like Googling things and researching, there was almost no nobody was really making content about cards. Like there were, I'm no one as in with quotations, because there was obviously people making content. And now you see, obviously, I write for Sports Illustrated, and there are tons of companies they have a sports card specific section of their website, or they're sports card content creators making interesting content that's going to help consumers make the right buying decisions. And like I was just saying, the buying decision, I think, is so important for people who are trying to, whether you're trying to make money or you're just trying to have fun within cards. I think, like, if you don't have the correct tools to buy the cards or make the decisions, then you are more likely to potentially waste your money and waste probably time as well. But the money thing, I think, is really one of the more important aspects of it, because within the sports card industry, there are ways where you can fund yourself buying cards. You can buy and sell. You can do all of these things to fund the collection that you have. But like I said, I think Alt here, if you go to their website, just right off the bat, like in their main section, there's something called Market Trends. And the Market Trends show you, they have basketball. It's similar to Card Ladder's back end. So and I don't know if they're using the same API that Card Ladder has potentially, but like they've got basketball, baseball, and they mainly focus on kind of it looks like the main sports, but they don't have like Card Ladder has like a high end, low, and they have, I don't know, it's like 30 different trending indexes, where Alt here has 6, which is basically all the main sports. And then you can see the players who are going up and players who are going down. And just overall, I think it is an experience where, like, if you're going to eBay, really you can only buy the cards. Like, you don't have much information on that site. Like, you could find previous sales of the cards, but within Alt, you can look at, if you click on like their auction sections, they have cards that you can buy directly on Alt and keep them in their vault, or they give you options for eBay. Like if you're looking at any like PSA 10s of any pretty common card, you're going to be able to find recent sales from that card, whether it's on eBay or whether it's on some of the other auction platforms. But the thing with Alt is they have auctions that are live auctions that you can I think you can put through bids on Alt that are on eBay. I think you can do that, or it might just bring you to, because I've never bid on the cards, that's why I'm not 100% sure one way or the other, but it might just bring you to eBay's website where the actual auction is going on. And if you were to click on any of those players, like for example, like if you go to the rising and trending right now and you click on, let's just say, Shore Sanders, instead of listing every single card that's listed for that player, they basically, every single auction that's up for that player, they have each of the cards kind of broken out into the specific cards for the player. So for example, they have like the Bowman Chrome autograph for Shore Sanders 2023, or if you scroll down, you can find like a Shore Sanders PSA 10 or PSA 9, and then you click on that one, and like I said, it either will bring you to eBay, or you can, if they have the auction on Alt, you can also do that. But then they also have stuff like PSA 10 population. You can also just easily click through the PSA 10, PSA 9, and PSA 8. They don't go much far lower than that. I think probably on different types of cards they may go lower, but on a 2023 Bowman Chrome U, they're probably, the majority of cards that are graded for that one are going to be PSA 10 through PSA 8. And then, like I said, they also have recent transactions. So they have like best offers, buy it nows through eBay. So you can see if this card is actually selling above or below what they have listed on the site. So I'm not 100% sure why they chose this one specifically to be like not the like poster for the specific card, because I'm going to use the Shore Sanders. It's the PSA 10. Like you look at the recent transactions, they kind of range from like one sold for $26 and then recently one sold for $45. But it says the opening bid here is $95. Maybe it's just like the most recent listed card potentially, and that's why you're finding that one. But the integration with eBay here, I think, is very important. And I think it's going to help consumers and buyers make the right decisions to they're going to make the right decisions to buy the cards that they want at the correct price because you know, in this market, we do see a lot of fluctuation. Now, I don't think we're ever going to see the fluctuation we saw in 2020 and 2021, where week over week you saw cards double and triple and quadruple. Like, I think you will see that occasionally, but that was almost the norm, where now I think the norm is. You might see it go up $10, $15 depending on the card, or $20, $30, like I said, depending on the level of card that you're buying. But I don't think we're going to see the doubling and tripling. And then other options within this platform, and I don't mean to make this sound like I'm doing an ad for alt. It's just I've been looking at this platform in the past day or so, and I'm pretty impressed with it. So I'm just kind of going through some of the stuff. They also have the Shador Sanders trending. They have the football trending, which football is down about 12%, which is not great. The other reason I wanted to bring up alt is because they also had, and this is, I'm kind of getting past the platform a little bit and kind of moving on to just a quick piece of news that actually happened. There was a Disney 100 Topps Chrome Mickey Mouse 1/1 Superfractor that sold on alt for $500,000. And that is a price tag that I did not expect any of these Disney cards to really sell for. We are looking at, in 2025, a Topps Chrome set with Marvel, and I talked about that on the podcast probably a couple weeks ago when the actual news dropped. But in the UK, we are going to get a Marvel, Star Wars, Disney, Pixar. All of these brands are now, I think all of the brands are being condensed into the Topps branding. And I wouldn't be surprised if they stay in the UK. I heard that they were going to do some releases within the United States, which I think makes sense. But the majority of the cards being the UK, I'm fine with, because Disney is just such a global brand that, again, if you can make it cheaper for customers to get these cards, ultimately, I think that is going to be better for people than if you are trying to get them shipped from the United States or get boxes shipped from the United States or any of these things. Chances are it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive. Also, just because in Europe and within the UK, I'm sure based on continents, there's probably, I don't know, some sort of different shipping laws or shipping costs that you don't have to worry about if you're getting stuff shipped from, the UK to France or, any of those European countries. You don't really have to worry about, I don't know, whatever it going overseas potentially. I mean, that's ultimately, I don't think there's much mail that's getting lost necessarily in that system that's going overseas, but it is one less variable that you have to worry about. And I don't know, the $500,000 price tag on that Disney card, it does seem a little bit high. I mean, if it is the first Mickey Mouse Superfractor, that could be probably a reason why I could see it selling for that price tag. But it's not the first Mickey Mouse card. Within this Topps Chrome set, there's also, I don't know if people heard about this, there's also going to be the first ever Topps licensed Walt Disney autograph cards as well. So they're obviously going to be cut autos, which that should be pretty obvious at this point. But they actually are going to be real autos and not the printed on autographs like they have on some of the other cards, which I've seen them promoting a little bit. That was one of the issues, actually, and it's funny. I've recorded a whole show talking about those the Disney autographs. And then I was looking at them on eBay. I was like, these feel really weird looking. I don't know. And then I was looking through them and they were all exactly the same. And I was like, oh, so now I basically have to re-record that episode because I had been, talking about how they were autographs, but not actually the real autographs for the actual characters. They were autographs that were just printed on. They were the character names, but they weren't the actual actors that did the signatures themselves. So either way, that's kind of the big news from this past day or so, is that we had one of the biggest cards, I guess, from that Disney 100 set. It had a six-figure price. No, I guess it would have been, six-figure price tag, so $500,000. It's going to be probably one of the bigger. I would imagine that's got to be one of the biggest Disney Topps Chrome sales. But once we see more of these products coming out, I don't know. I think that there could be a chance that we do see more cards in that price range potentially. The fifth inning of last night's World Series is unfortunately going to go down as potentially one of the worst innings of baseball in the storied history of the Yankees. And I don't want to, I'm not going to drag Yankees fans. I mean, I am a Red Sox fan, so to see Yankees fans crying a little bit is, I don't know, whatever. We'll move past it. But so unfortunately, if you're a Yankees fan, Dodgers, they pull out Game 5 last night, so they end up winning the series 4-1. And I guess there's a couple different pieces of news, or there's a couple different things that I want to touch on in this episode. The first thing is the Ohtani 1-of-1 50-50. The 50-50 1-of-1 autograph card from Topps Now has been pulled. It was posted on Reddit. I don't know. Somebody, I guess they didn't. They were probably being sarcastic because, if you look at social media and you look at any of the people who pull stuff, there's like a meme that's like, oh, is this like good? And then it's like ends up being like a Tom Brady autograph or something ridiculous. And this obviously is the 1-of-1, which maybe doesn't say 1-of-1 on the card, so maybe the person didn't know. But that 1-of-1 has been pulled, and I guess the 1-of-1 for that Topps LeBron KD Curry triple auto hasn't been pulled yet. I don't know. That's a weird story that I don't know if we have the full context for, so I'm not necessarily going to touch on that in this piece. But the 1-of-1 Ohtani has been pulled, and I think people are speculating what that card is eventually going to sell for, because I think ultimately, when these big cards are pulled or when they are kind of show up on social media, inevitably in the next few months, they end up selling. Especially if, I don't know how many of those cards that person bought. There were 600,000, I think, copies printed. So chances are they probably bought a few. But if they only pulled one and you bought like an $11 card and now you have potentially like I don't know. I mean, I've never necessarily been good at projecting where I think cards are eventually going to sell for. So, but I am going to do it right now. So, but either way, so I think that, I don't know, it's probably 500,000 realistically. Like it's going to be an on-card auto. It's a 1-of-1 Ohtani. It's commemorating this amazing moment. It probably will be the most expensive Topps Now card for sure. I mean, until this LeBron the triple auto gets unearthed, like this will probably be the most expensive sale of a Topps Now card, which for me, the number one Topps Now lover in the podcasting space, that's a good thing for me because it just reinforced my stance on Topps Now and how I think it's a good product and how I think it's actually an underrated product because for a number of different reasons that I'm not going to get into on the podcast that I've gotten into on other episodes. But so that 1-of-1 has been pulled. Now I'm going to talk about the World Series a little bit here and what it means for, I think the three biggest players from the World Series. You have MVP, Freddie Freeman. You have Mookie Betts, who is potentially becoming the face of the league. Like you have two of the faces of the league if you're the Dodgers, which I think is pretty crazy. And then you have Ohtani, which I saw some cool videos of Ohtani. Like people in Japan were watching the game and they were like in like they're doing like a watch party. It was really actually very cool. And they had like the Thunder Sticks, which I'm not 100% sure if those are famous in Japan or in like the APAC region of baseball. But I know that like I'm pretty sure you can't. I think that they're banned in the U.S. at sporting events, if I'm not mistaken. They may not be, but either way, they're people had like and they were all doing it at the same time, which was pretty cool. But so for Ohtani, I think Ohtani now gets into the conversation like Patrick Mahomes is right now, where his cards, I think that we have hit a floor with Ohtani with what his prices will sit at. Like same with Mahomes. Like I think Mahomes is a three-time champion, three-time champion. I really don't see how his cards drop. Now, for Mahomes, there really isn't a huge selection. Like you're really looking at like his Prism rookie or his Contenders autograph or any of his National Treasures RPAs. For Ohtani, the amount of cards, because, Mahomes 2017, Ohtani 2018, we saw a huge jump in the production of sports cards from 2017 to 2018. And the amount of cards with Ohtani coming over. I mean, Ohtani has been, since his rookie year in the MLB, has been this like mystical player that everyone has like seen. I mean, he's broken records and he really has, gone above and beyond what I think people thought that he was going to be able to do in his career. Because, I mean, sure, to break Babe Ruth's records of pitching and hitting, we haven't seen a player who could do both at that level. So obviously he's going to be doing that. But I don't know. I think he is in he's going to now be in the Mahomes, the LeBron category, where like, I think he almost is maybe potentially above Mahomes when it comes to where his cards should be valued. I think that they should be valued closer to LeBron's cards because both Ohtani and LeBron, now different circumstances of when they came into the league. Ohtani almost had a full career in Japan before he came here, but had this huge anticipation for what he was going to do in the league, and he has absolutely shattered it. Now he's a World Series champion, which is, phenomenal. And so next player, Mookie Betts, face of the league. Unfortunately, as a Red Sox fan, it crushes me to know that Mookie Betts has now won 2 championships. I think I saw some stat that he was the first player to ever win multiple championships with 2 different teams, or one of the first. I know I can't imagine there are that many that could be in that category. But Mookie Betts, his cards, I have always thought that Mookie Betts' cards were underrated, in my opinion. Like going back super far, like when Mookie was still on the Red Sox and winning. No, that actually can't be correct. But when he was moving, he was probably on the Red Sox and then moved over to the Dodgers. I'm just thinking of when the Red Sox last won a championship and when he was on that team. I guess it would have been 2018. So maybe I was into sports cards then. But when I got into sports cards, immediately I was like, oh, Mookie Betts, that's an underrated player. And I do think that his pricing has caught up to where I think the level of play is, but I don't know. I still think that there is a significant gap where if you're buying his cards now, but here's the other thing. If you're buying his cards now, you do probably have to be holding them for the long term. Like Mookie isn't going to be a player who is a short-term flip. I think maybe they're going to see spikes here and there, but I think Mookie is going to go on to be potentially one of the best players of this generation. And then the third player that I want to talk about, Freddie Freeman. I mean, MVP, World Series MVP, home runs in 6 straight playoff games. I mean, it went on a generational, historic type of run for the MLB and for the playoffs here. Now, his cards, I think he's in an interesting conversation of a star that never got really the recognition that he deserved within the sports card space. I think that he's in a similar category potentially to like a Buster Posey, a player who, I mean, and 2-time world champion for Freddie Freeman with 2 different teams also. Buster Posey, I think, was a multi-champion with San Francisco. But I think like Buster Posey's cards are another good example. Like he was the best player of a position in his generation. I don't necessarily think Freddie Freeman is the best first baseman of this generation. Like I'm sure if I were to make like a short list, I could think of other players that might be in that conversation. But I think another player who maybe has some underrated cards, but the thing is, do not buy them now, unfortunately. And also he's 34 years old, so that might be another issue for buying his cards. But if you're going to, it's probably worth waiting for the offseason. But I think with him also it could be tricky because if he retires, then you're looking at probably like World Series MVP probably gave him a bump. And then if he retires, I think that gives him another little bump. So I don't know. Maybe it is the time to buy. I don't know. It really comes down to if he retires this season or if he does like an Al Horford, where Horford, which not first championship, but first championship for Al Horford, finally gets that championship. You kind of think he probably could retire, but plays another season. I think Freeman probably has another season or 2 in him. So if he doesn't retire this offseason, it's going to be an offseason play for Freddie Freeman if you're buying any of his cards. And then, I don't know, the retirement, in my opinion, is probably where you'd want to sell them if you're looking for like a mid to short term flip for Freddie Freeman. Again, I don't think he gets the recognition in the card market that he potentially deserves. I think this World Series is going to give him that bump for sure. But overall, I don't know. He's not necessarily like a top guy when it comes to his prices within the sports card market, but also compared to the impact that I think that he has had as a player in this league. And, I kind of want to end things with Mike Trout, I guess, and this will be maybe quick. Like, I think I don't know what Trout is going to do, and I think this is maybe a cautionary tale for people who are looking to buy cards who are buying high, and maybe Ohtani is an example here. If you're buying high on a player, Trout unfortunately has just not, like, he just has injuries, I think, has really derailed Trout's career, unfortunately, and I don't think it's going to be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know who you really could compare him to in the history of sports, because he was the face of the league for quite some time. But I think, with Trout, I think he was the face of the league when there really wasn't the social media presence, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, he was the face of the league before other people on social media kind of deemed other people to be the face of the league, I guess, and that's kind of I don't know if I made the right comparison there, but I think he was always the guy that was like, yep, he's the safe bet. And I think, unfortunately, he is a perfect example, and it really is unfortunate that the injuries and all the stuff that's happened. And unless he goes somewhere and potentially wins a World Series, I think Trout will end up being a cautionary tale in the sports card market of, like, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And if a player is not at the end of their career, if they're not a Albert Pujols, for example, like that, calling them the face of the league and buying their cards at a level where they still have maybe another decade, because Trout just signed that contract a couple years ago, a 12-year deal, has another decade potentially in the league, that this is just going to be a cautionary tale to really just be careful of the cards that you're buying, especially when everybody in the sports card market is saying that this is the card to buy. Just be careful, and you really make the decisions that you think are correct. Now, granted, you could have thought Trout was going to continue to be this. So, maybe that is, maybe it's a backwards take there. But at the same time, just make sure that you're buying the cards that you want to buy, not the cards that people are telling you to buy.